Hello and welcome back to the 2023 Microsoft Excel Collegiate Challenge. My name is David Brown. I'm the founder of the Microsoft Excel Collegiate Challenge and also an associate professor of finance at the University of Arizona. In this month's challenge, we're going to be working on a commission calculator that you would use either as a sales agent or perhaps as a manager of a sales team. In this walkthrough video, I'm going to highlight one way to solve the different challenges. However, there are many ways to do it. I want to highlight the filter function, which is a great way to deal with reducing a set of data to only the data that you care about, and then also using a data table to solve the problem. So let's get to it. This is what you should see when you open up your file. Now, if you don't see it exactly like this, you might need to disable the macro protections, and there's a video in the link below that'll show you how to do that. But you do have to enable the macros because that's part of what makes it run. So I'm going to click OK or Enable Content up here. That way we have the macros working. It does tell us right away that our random values have been successfully updated, and that's going to be something I talk about as we work through the walkthrough here. Now, like I said, this is about a commissions calculator. So as we tab through, we can see we have some case details. You'll want to read this and kind of see how each of the commissions are determined. It's based on how much you sell as a percentage of your goal, whether you hit certain targets to get fixed dollar bonuses, and how many add-on sales you have as well. So there's a number of details in the case that you'll want to read through, and I'll talk about them a bit as we go through this walkthrough. We're also going to have case data. So these are going to be our sales agents and the sales they've made along with the companies and the dates. So this is what we're going to use to drive our calculations. Now, Commissions Calculator 1 is our first challenge. All right, in this case, I'll zoom out slightly so we can see a bit more, is we're given a set of parameters. Note everything that's gray with blue text here. These are parameters that can change. So this is what the random values were that the spreadsheet talked about at the beginning. And so you want to build your model robust and dynamic. That way it can handle when these values change and your answers are still going to be correct. So once we get our model built, we're going to have to answer this series of questions. So for example, for Andrew, what were his total sales? What percentage had add-on sales? What were the total of the add-on sales, etc. So we'll walk through these questions as we go, but to set this up initially, I'm going to build a filter. Essentially, I'm going to take the table of data that we have and I'm going to filter it down so all we're looking at are Andrew's sales. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is pull in our data from our sales data tab. And the first thing I need to do that is just the headers, so I keep an idea of what's going on and I can see it very nicely visually. So now I'm going to throw in my filter function, and this is a relatively new function in Excel. And so the first argument it takes, if you haven't seen it before, is the array of data that we want to work with. So on the sales data tab, I'll select all of our array here. And then the second argument is the include statement. So this is which items do we want to include? In this case, we want to include anywhere the rep is equal to the rep we have selected here, which happens to be Andrew right now. So as soon as we hit enter on that, we should see that array of data populate. And this is what's called a spilled array. So we don't know how big it's going to be, and you can see we have grayed out formulas down below where the filter function is spilling into. Now say you have something in one of these cells down here, like I just have David typed down here. What you're going to see is this spill error, hashtag spill, and that's because it can't spill into that area because I have this cell David down here. So if I delete that, then we're okay again. We don't have that piece there anymore. All right, so now to make this a bit easier to work with, I'm going to convert my dates, which are currently in number form. Let's just convert those to actual dates, Control-Shift-3, and now we can see the dates we're working with. And in this problem, we're going to work with all of the dates in the date range. So we're not going to filter on that yet, but that's what we're going to do on the next tab. So by using this filter solution, we're going to build a model on this first tab that we can easily copy and paste to the second tab, and then just make small adjustments to this filter function exactly. All right, so now let's see what the questions are, and we can work on starting to answer them. So the first question here is, what is the total of the base sales for Andrew? All right, so we have the base amount sales here. And so what we could do, and actually let me move this over just a little bit. There we go. So we could do a sum of that entire array. All right, so where that could be problematic is what we're summing. You can see we're summing down to row 23. All right, so row 23 is currently the end of the array, but if we had a different sales agent, we could have more or fewer rows in the data table, in the table of data rather. And so that's a weakness of doing this kind of way. And I'll show you a way to get around that in a second. But we're going to start with this sum, and I'll just note that you could just extend this range out. You know, instead of going to 23, you could go to 230. That'll cover all potential data here. So let's do it that way to start. We'll make sure it works, and I'm going to show you how to make the adjustment when we go to the next tab. All right, so we want to sum the total there, and we can go ahead and link this to our answer. We see we get the first answer correct. Now our second answer is what percentage of Andrew's sales have an add-on? All right, notice we accidentally turned these into dates. So we're just going to flip those back to this normal format. You can see when you start doing shift lots of arrow keys, you get lots of keystrokes that you're seeing on my side there. All right, so now if we want to see how many, well, we can do a count of how many numbers do we have in there. And again, let's just take this out to 230. And we can divide by the count of how many numbers we have, not in column O, but over in column N. All right, so we just want to know the percentage of sales where there was an add-on. So that's what we're going to call the attachment rate in this case. All right, so we have our 26%, 27 if we round up, and if we link that, we see we got our answer correct. Now we also want the add-on sales. We got those. Let's link that over. So we just copied our formula. And then the last thing we want is the total of new business. So new business has the yes here. And so we need to add up everything in column N that corresponds to new business. So to do that, we can do not a COUNTIF, but a SUMIF. And I'm going to use SUMIFs to sum that range as long as the criteria range is equal to yes. And I'm going to make sure I increase both those to 230. That way the model is still going to work with different sets of data. And we should get our answer there. And let's set that equal. And we've got our first 4 questions correct. All right, so we've got our data dealt with. The rest of the questions are going to be figuring out the commissions associated with those sales. So let's get into those. So the first one asks here, or the 5th question, what percentage of his goal did Andrew meet? So his sales were 350,000, the base sales. We divide that by the goal amount, 260, gives us the 135%. All right, so he did very well relative to his goal. Now we want to figure out what payout percent applies to those base sales then. And we see we have a table up here of our base sales commissions. And so anything up to 50% gets an 8% payout. Anything up to 100% gets a 19% payout. And anything up to 120 gets a 26% payout. Well, Andrew's exceeded all those, and so his payout's going to be up to 500%, so it's between those two. So it should be 36%. So to get that, what we're going to use is an XLOOKUP. So we want to look up our 135%. Notice that it's not exactly in the table. So we're going to have to use approximate matching here. And so we're going to skip over the 4th argument, and we're going to look for the exact match or the next larger item. So that's what the 1 is going to signify. And so when we close that up, when it doesn't find 135% in this red area, it's going to look for the next biggest thing, which is 500%, and then return this 36% as a result. All right, now let's see the opposite, because there's also a static bonus, so a dollar bonus based on the percentage of your goal you hit. So here, if you hit between 0 and 100% of your goal, you get $0. If you hit 100% or higher, up to 125, you get 1,000. 125 or higher, 3,500, etc. So in this case, we want to find the 135%, but rounding down, because if you have 135, well, you haven't hit the 150% threshold. So his bonus should be 3,500. So let's do that with our XLOOKUP. We're going to look up the 135% again in this table. And this time, instead of using a 1, we're going to use a -1. And if we go back, we see that's the exact match or the next smaller item. All right, so that's what we want here. That next smaller item gives us that $3,500 bonus. All right, now what percent of commission applies to his new business sales, or his add-on sales rather. So here we're going to use the add-on amount, 27%, and now we're just going to look it up in our add-on goal. Notice I forgot my function, so let's do an X lookup. So now we're going to look it up there, and it's the same as before, where you're going to look for the next larger item in this case, whereas if we're looking for the dollar bonus, we take that same 27% add-on rate, attachment rate rather, look it up here. We're going to use the -1 instead to get that there's 0 bonus for that 27% attachment rate. All right, we got a couple more questions to finish out this tab. So here we can say for the new business percent bonus, well, as long as he exceeds this minimum base percent threshold, we're okay. So if his 135% is greater than the 50% threshold, then he gets 11% bonus on those new business sales, otherwise 0. And now we have all of our values, so now we can go through and calculate his commission. So the commission is going to be the dollar bonuses, so let's just add those, plus the new business commission times the new business dollar amount, plus the add-on percentage times the add-on amount, plus the base sales times the base sales amount. If we add that all up, we get 147,000. And so if we do that as a percentage of total sales, we can take the 147,000, divide by the total sales, which is going to be base sales plus add-on sales. Notice new business is actually already within the base sales. And then we get 41%. Now, if you're doing this as a live timed exercise, you'll get a message that says you completed the first tab, and then it'll open up the second tab, Commission Calculator 2. All right, so we're on to Commission Calculator 2. We're going to try to recycle as much of our model as we can. And the only thing that really changes in this one is we now have a sales period. So this sales period is going to tell us when the sales apply for this amount of commissions. So our commissions amount changed, our payout percentages didn't change, but now we have to only apply them to sales that take place in that date range. And this is where the filter function is going to come in really handy. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually copy what we've set up on this tab. So let's take all this. We're going to copy that. Notice that this is in J7 is where the top corner is. So I'm going to be careful to find J7 again and paste that over here. That way everything is referenced the same way. Everything's in the same position. And now I'm also going to take my answer cells and I'm going to paste them over here as well. And notice our answers really aren't working. A couple of them randomly are working. And that's because we haven't yet adapted this filter to this new sales date range. So once we adapt it to the sales date range, we should be okay. And at that point, our answers should be correct. So let's see if that works. So what we're going to do here in the filter function is we have to expand this include function. All right, so the include function can have one statement like this, where it's equal to a person's name, right? That column B is equal to the sales agent. But we can also include multiple other conditions. And you can use either and or logic here. The way the syntax is built is if you want to use and logic, you set up multiple conditions within parentheses that are multiplied together. So in this case, I'm setting this up to have one condition be true, and the other two conditions also have to be true in order for the filter to act on that. So all three criteria will be true for it to be included in the filter. All right, I'll talk about or in just a second. All right, so the criteria now, if we go back to our sales data, well, we're interested in the date range. So let's select all the date and say it has to be greater than or equal to our start date. All right, that's relatively intuitive. So it has to be greater than the start date. And if we copy that, our last criteria can be that it needs to be less than or equal to the end date. All right, so I just switched that B to a C and I moved over my reference one cell. And so now it's only going to look for things from Andrew between February 1st and April 30th. So let's hit enter. We see that our data filtered down, right? We have less records showing, and now all of our answers are correct. All right, so that's the quick and easy way to go from level 1 to level 2 when all we have to do is make an adjustment to our filter. Now I did mention that we can do and or we can do or. So let's go ahead and take this first multiply, right? It's the star symbol, and if we make it a plus, that instead is going to mean or. And so if we change this to a plus, what we're saying now is that the agent has to be Andrew, or the date range has to be between February and April. That's those other two that are multiplied together. So if we hit enter here, we're going to still see the sales from Andrew, but we're going to see all of Andrew's sales, and we're going to see all of the other agents' sales that took place from February to April. And that's exactly what we see when we expand out. So that's how to think about the and versus the or. And so I'm going to flip that back to an and statement with the star to get back to our regular amount. The other thing I promised I'd show you is how do you make these things dynamic. All right, so I'm going to reset this. Let's get rid of these. And we're going to use an offset function to make this all dynamic. And this is a pretty advanced technique, but I want to make sure you're aware of it. So the offset function is going to select an array, and it's going to do so in a dynamic size. And so I have to tell it where to start my array. In this case, I want to start where my base sales start. And you can then move from there, up cells, down cells, left and right cells. And that's what this 0 and 0 tells it to do, is it says move 0 cells to the right and move 0 cells down. I don't want it to move anywhere relative to that. But what I want it to do is give me an array that goes all the way down to the bottom of my table. So I need to know how many rows. I can look right now and say, well, look, there are 4 rows. So I'd like a 4 in there. And I would like this array to be 1 wide. And if I do that, it's going to work and it adds everything up for me. All right, so it worked, but it's hard-coded in the sense that that 4 is there. All right, so how do we get rid of that? So I'm going to use the rows function. And what the rows function does is it's just going to tell you how many rows are in an array. And in this case, we can select J9 and type hashtag. I'm going to throw an F4 on that to lock it. Sorry about that. Let's try that one more time. I must have hit a bad keystroke. So rows, that one, hashtag. And we're going to lock it with F4. And now we see the same thing is working, but it's going to dynamically adapt to how many rows there are. And if we want to see that, let's actually just throw our plus back in here. And now we see that our sum adjusted based on now a much bigger array. So that rows function is really handy here to give us a dynamic way to add up whatever happens to be given by the filter function. All right, and if you want to adapt this to the other ones, you can use the offset on the add-on amounts, on the counts, and also on the new business. So you can do the same trick, just using the offset to select the arrays here. All right, so now with a little fast-forwarding magic, I have rewrote the sum to get the offsets in here. Here you can see a count where we're dividing by a couple of offsets. And this last one is a sum product, which is a really advanced way of using these offsets. But feel free to study that if you want to take a look at how that works. All right, our last step, though, is to go to this Team Commissions tab, where we're going to try to do that calculation, but for all the members in our team. So here, you notice our questions are going to be based on who has the highest sales, the highest effective commission rate, and what's the effective commission rate for the entire team. So to know that, we have to be able to pull all that same data, right? Everything we calculated over here, we want to pull for our entire team. So we basically have a lot of scenarios we want to use, which brings up a data table. So what I'm going to do is take our answers here, and I'm going to come over here and paste them. And so I'm going to do ESL to paste special links, and also EST to paste the formats. That way we can see our answers. And like I said, we want to run this across all of our sales agents, so we need a list of our sales agents. So here I'm going to use the unique function back here in our data to get all the unique agents. But these unique agents, we'd like that to be horizontal, not vertical. So let's wrap it with a transpose. All right, so we wrap that with our transpose, and now we have the start of a data table. All right, so a data table is basically just going to run a scenario where we change an input value, Max, Poria, Kate, different sales agents, into our model. And the way this model is set up is if we actually come and change this cell right here, this F25 for Andrew, it's going to filter through the model and also change this cell. And when this cell changes, remember all our functions are going to update, and we're going to get new values right here. And that's what it's going to report back to us in the data table. All right, so that's how we're going to build this data table, is based on changing that cell. So we're going to hit Alt AWT, pull that over, and we're going to do a row input cell because our parameter here is all in a row. It's the names of our agents, and we're going to point that right over here at F25. We'll hit OK, In this case, I need to hit F9 to refresh my values. And now you see that we have all that data for each of the 8 different sales agents, which is really valuable if you're a manager trying to look over a team and understand kind of the big picture rather than looking at one agent in particular. All right, so now we can get to answering our questions. So the first question is, what salesperson has the highest total sales? So if you remember total sales, we're going to have to add the base sales plus the add-on. We'll go ahead and copy that across with Control R. And now I'm going to go ahead and do a lookup function. So let me zoom out so you can see a little bit more what I'm doing. So I'm going to use XLOOKUP here, and I'm going to look up the maximum value from that set of total sales. So whatever that maximum is, I want to find it in that array and then return the name of that person. All right, so it's just a standard XLOOKUP. If you're not familiar with XLOOKUP, we're going to go ahead and include that in the comments below so you can take a look at a video on that. All right, so we're going to use that same thing. The next question is, who has the highest effective commission rate? So again, we want to find the maximum of all the commission rates. We're going to look it up in that same array and return back the person. All right, now I'm embedding this maximum function inside the XLOOKUP. You could take an extra step and do the max function separately and then do an XLOOKUP on the result of that max function. Either way is going to be okay in this case. All right, so we have our answers there. Now we want to calculate the effective commission rate. To do that, we have to sum up what is the total base sales, what are the total sales of the add-ons, what are the total commissions, and what are the total of the add-ons plus the base. So once we've done that, we can just take our commissions, divide by our total of our base plus add-ons, and we see we get our 20.2%, and all of our answers match. Notice occasionally these answer cells that turn green to highlight when they're correct. Sometimes they don't turn green. Some of the calculations can be slow. You can always go to your question results tab and see what's correct, which will be a true, or what's false, which will not be. And here we have all the answers correct. We didn't do it timed, so we don't have a timed result, but that's okay. I recommend working through the model, making sure you understand how to do it. And then I think it's worth going back. You can start on the first tab here and start a time trial. That way you can go through and kind of encourage yourself to get faster, practice these functions so you can really master them, and be ready for the competition if that's what you're aiming for down in the fall, and hopefully to join us here for the finals in December. So I hope you enjoyed this case. Hopefully it helps you think about how you might build a commissions calculator in the future, or actually to use the filter function in the data table and lots of the other work you're going to be doing throughout your career. Good luck on the rest of the challenge, and hope to see you here in Tucson in December.